Why idiots rise to power. Machiavelli saw it coming. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. Have you ever looked around at the people in charge, whether in politics, business, or even your local community, and thought, how did that person get there? Not in a dismissive way, but in a genuinely confused, intellectually curious way. Because sometimes it seems like the least qualified, the most shallow, or even the most manipulative people end up holding the most power. It feels like a cosmic joke. But what if I told you it's not a joke? And it's not new either. In fact, a man over 500 years ago saw it coming. His name? Niccolo Machiavelli. Now, Machiavelli wasn't a villain, despite what popular culture might suggest. He wasn't teaching people how to be evil. He was just painfully honest about human nature and the brutal mechanics of power. And his most famous work, The Prince, is often misunderstood. It's not a manifesto for tyranny, it's a mirror, one that reflects the uncomfortable truth about how power actually works in the real world, and in that mirror we see something terrifying: idiots, manipulators, and opportunists rising to the top, not because the system is broken, but because the system rewards them.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's be clear, when we say idiots, we're not just talking about people with low intelligence. We're talking about those who are morally asleep, people who act without wisdom, without empathy, without long-term thinking, people who chase attention over substance, who manipulate emotions rather than appeal to reason. And somehow these people keep climbing. Why? Machiavelli hinted at a cold truth. The masses are often driven by perception, not reality. If you appear confident, if you tell people what they want to hear, if you promise them safety, or better yet, someone to blame, you can control them. Even if you are dangerously incompetent beneath the surface. But here's the twist, it's not just their fault, it's ours too. We reward charisma over competence. We crave certainty in a world full of ambiguity. We want heroes and villains, not nuance. And so, when someone shows up with a neatly packaged answer, even if it's wrong, we follow. Why? Because uncertainty is terrifying. Because responsibility is hard. Because deep down, we all want someone else to take charge, even if they lead us off a cliff. This is where Machiavelli's genius becomes uncomfortable. He understood that in politics, it's often better to seem good than to be good. That image is everything. That the crowd will forgive almost anything if you give them a compelling enough story. That's why the idiots rise, not because they're smarter, but because they understand the game better. They know how to manipulate the human psyche, how to exploit our fears and desires, how to weaponize hope, and let's be honest, it works. But here's a deeper question you should ask yourself. If the idiots keep winning, what does that say about us as a society? What does it say about you? Are you immune to their influence? Or are you just a little better at hiding it from yourself? Machiavelli didn't believe that people were evil by nature. He believed they were self-interested. And that's not a condemnation, it's a challenge. Because if we want better leaders, we have to become better followers. We have to educate ourselves, question more deeply, resist the seduction of easy answers. The next time you see someone rise to power who seems hollow or dangerous, don't just ask, how did they get there? Ask instead, What did they understand about us that we didn't understand about ourselves? And then ask yourself this: if you had their power, would you do better, or would you also be tempted by the illusion, the applause, the control? The truth is, Machiavelli didn't just write about princes, he wrote about us. He held up a mirror, not to the rulers, but to the ruled. He wanted us to see how easily we are fooled, how quickly we trade liberty for security, how desperately we want someone to tell us what to believe. So now I ask you, when you look at the world today, do you see the smarter, wiser, more ethical people rising to the top? Or do you see a pattern that's older than democracy itself? A pattern Machiavelli predicted centuries ago. And if that pattern keeps repeating, what can we do? What must we do to break it? The seduction of power and the anatomy of the crowd. Power is not always seized, it is often given. And that is one of the most uncomfortable truths we have to face. We imagine tyrants as people who claw their way to the top through brute force or cunning manipulation, but the deeper, more disturbing reality is that many are invited in, welcomed even, applauded, because the crowd, the faceless collective mass of people, does not always want truth, justice, or wisdom. Often it wants comfort, it wants simplicity, it wants a story that makes sense even if that story is a lie. And that is why the wrong people rise. Not because they're smarter, but because they know what we want to hear and are unafraid to say it. Machiavelli understood power not as something metaphysical, but as a constant transaction between leader and led. He saw the crowd not as a rational jury, but as an emotional organism, swayed by spectacle, driven by fear, and hungry for reassurance. A good leader, in his eyes, was not always the most moral one, but the one who could read the shifting winds of public sentiment and act decisively, sometimes ruthlessly, to maintain control. It doesn't mean he admired cruelty, it means he understood its utility. And, more importantly, he understood our tendency to accept cruelty if it's wrapped in the right narrative. A leader who commits oppression under the banner of safety is far more likely to be forgiven than one who speaks the truth and makes us uncomfortable. And this brings us to the crowd, us. Let's not pretend we are separate from it. The crowd is not some abstract them. It's your neighbor, your co-worker, your family. It's you and it's me, especially when we stop thinking critically and start feeling collectively. And here's the terrifying part. The crowd doesn't want to think. Thinking is hard. Thinking requires doubt, introspection, humility. But feeling is easy, feeling is fast, feeling is contagious. And the idiot who rises to power knows this. They thrive in the fog of emotion. They don't need facts, they only need fear, or hope, or better yet, a villain. And who becomes the villain? Anyone who disrupts the narrative, the intellectual, the critic, the whistleblower, the philosopher. Throughout history, these are the people who are silenced, not because they're wrong, but because they're inconvenient. The crowd doesn't want to be awakened, it wants to be comforted. And anyone who disrupts that comfort becomes a threat to be eliminated. This is how the seduction of power works, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. The leader offers a fantasy, the crowd accepts it, and together they create a reality that punishes dissent and rewards compliance. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't feel like oppression, it feels like unity, it feels like purpose, it feels like patriotism or righteousness or faith. And in that intoxicating feeling, the idiot consolidates power, not through violence alone, but through validation. But let's go deeper. Why are we so easily seduced? Why do we keep falling for the same tricks? The truth is, most people don't want to be free, they want to be safe. They don't want to lead their own lives, they want someone to tell them what's right, what's wrong, who to hate and who to trust. That's not a condemnation, that's a survival instinct. In a chaotic world, certainty is a drug, and the person who offers it, no matter how empty their words, becomes irresistible. Now ask yourself, how often do you choose comfort over truth? How often do you follow the loudest voice instead of the wisest one? How often do you feel a sense of belonging in the crowd, even when you know the crowd is wrong? We are taught to believe that democracy protects us from tyranny, but Machiavelli saw something deeper, that democracy, without vigilance and education, can become just another path to tyranny, one where the crowd chooses its own chains, where we vote for the people who reflect our worst instincts, not our best, where we elevate entertainers over thinkers, influencers over leaders, slogans over substance. So what can we do? First, we must reclaim our individual minds. That means questioning what's popular. That means resisting the urge to join the mob, even when it feels righteous. That means having the courage to be uncomfortable, because freedom is not found in applause, it's found in doubt, in the quiet act of thinking for yourself when everyone else is shouting. Second, we must understand how power really works, not just in textbooks, but in practice. We must study history, psychology, propaganda. We must teach ourselves and others how to recognize manipulation, not just in others, but in ourselves. Because the idiot who rises to power does so on our blind spots. And most importantly, we must stop waiting for someone better to save us. We must become better. Not perfect, not ideal, just better. More aware, more critical, more willing to stand alone when the crowd rushes blindly forward. Because if we don't, we will continue to invite the idiot in, again and again, not because we're evil, but because we're tired. And the idiot promises that we don't have to think anymore. The masks of virtue, how pretending to be good becomes a weapon. It's one of the greatest paradoxes of modern life. The people who speak most loudly about goodness, justice, and morality are often the ones doing the most harm behind the scenes. And yet, they rise, they are celebrated, they win followers, elections, promotions, they dominate conversations. Why? Because, in a world driven by perception, the appearance of virtue has become more powerful than virtue itself. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He warned that the successful prince must learn not just how to be good, but how to appear good, especially when he is not. This isn't just political cynicism, it's a brutal psychological truth. Most people don't have the time or the will to investigate deeply into others' character. We judge based on what we can see, and what we see is often a curated performance. The idiot who rises to power is often not the loud brute, but the smiling idealist, the one who says the right things, who posts the right hashtags, who shows just enough compassion, just enough outrage to convince us they care, but they don't. Not really. They care about control. They care about legacy. They care about themselves. And their performance of virtue is a weapon, a shield, that makes them untouchable and a sword that silences their critics. Think about how often we fall for this. A leader cries on camera, a CEO donates to a cause while laying off thousands, a politician makes a speech about unity while feeding division behind a curtain. We eat it up because it feels good to believe we are led by good people. It reassures us. It allows us to avoid the hard work of discernment. But Machiavelli would have laughed bitterly. He knew that the most dangerous leaders are not the openly cruel ones. They're the ones who hide their ambition behind a mask of kindness. And yet we reward them. We reward the performance, not the substance. We reward those who look like what we want to see. And over time, the lines blur. Even the leaders themselves may begin to believe their own performance. They forget where the mask ends and the face begins. And in that confusion, morality becomes a tool of manipulation. Language is twisted. Peace becomes justification for war. Progress becomes a cover for exploitation. Freedom becomes a leash. This is not just a political problem. It's a human one. We all wear masks. We all want to be seen as good. But when goodness becomes a performance, it ceases to be good. It becomes currency, a way to buy influence, affection, power. And once that happens on a large scale, society itself begins to rot from the inside. So how do we resist this? How do we tell the difference between genuine virtue and manipulative performance? The first step is to stop being lazy with our admiration. Stop worshipping appearances. Ask harder questions. Watch what people do, not just what they say. Look for consistency. Look for humility. Real virtue doesn't advertise itself. It doesn't need to be on camera. It's quiet. It's often uncomfortable. It costs something. If someone's goodness is always public, always polished, always popular, you should be suspicious. The second step is to examine ourselves, because the reason these masks work is because we crave them. We want heroes. We want certainty. We want to believe that someone out there is pure, uncorrupted, morally clean. But that desire is dangerous. It blinds us. It makes us easy to manipulate. The only way to break the cycle is to let go of the fantasy, to accept that people are complex, that no one is perfectly good or evil, and that virtue is not aesthetic, it's action. Finally, we must cultivate the courage to stand apart, to speak the truth even when it's unpopular. Because the person who is willing to lose power for the sake of integrity is far more dangerous to the system than the idiot who wins by pretending to be good. And if we want to live in a world where the wise rise instead of the foolish, we must stop rewarding masks and start honoring substance. So I'll ask you now, how often do you mistake performance for principle? How often do you let someone's words replace their actions in your judgment? And when was the last time you removed your own mask, even when it cost you something? Breaking the cycle. Why it's not too late to choose different leaders and become one. The most dangerous lie we tell ourselves is that it's too late, that the rot is too deep, that the system is beyond saving, that no matter what we do, the wrong people will always rise to the top. This kind of fatalism is seductive. It gives us an excuse to be passive. It lets us off the hook. But here's the truth. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to tell us to surrender. He wrote it to warn us, to educate us, to show us exactly how power works so that we could recognize it, resist it, and maybe even wield it more wisely. Because If idiots can rise through understanding the game, then so can the wise, if they're willing to play. But that's the hard part, isn't it? The people most fit to lead are often the least interested in power. They don't crave the spotlight. They're not seduced by flattery or control. They're busy doing the real work, teaching, healing, building, reflecting. Meanwhile, the stage is left open for those who are loudest, most shameless, most willing to sell an illusion. The result? A world that increasingly feels upside down, where mediocrity is celebrated and depth is drowned out by noise. So, how do we break the cycle? We start by changing what we admire. If we keep rewarding spectacle, we will keep getting performers. If we continue to elevate those who entertain us over those who challenge us, we will continue to be ruled by the shallow. But admiration is a choice. Attention is a vote. Every time you click, share, follow, or endorse someone, you're shaping the future. If we want better leaders, we have to become better followers, more discerning, more principled, more willing to be uncomfortable. But it doesn't stop there. The harder truth is that we must also be willing to lead, not in the traditional sense, not in the way the world defines leadership today with titles, followers, and fame, but in the real sense, with vision, with courage, with integrity. Leadership isn't a position, it's a posture. It's how you live. It's how you speak when it's easier to be silent. It's how you act when no one is watching. And yes, it's how you influence others, by example, not by manipulation. Every time you choose truth over convenience, every time you stand up for someone without needing credit, every time you resist the temptation to perform virtue instead of living it, you are breaking the cycle. You are modeling a different kind of power. One that doesn't need applause to exist. And yes, it's slow. It's not flashy, it doesn't go viral overnight, but it's real. And real change, the kind that lasts, always begins in quiet places with individuals who have decided not to play the game by the old rules. So the final question I leave you with is this. Are you willing to be that kind of person? Not the one who rises by manipulation, but the one who rises by meaning. Not the one who seduces the crowd, but the one who wakes them up. Because if you are, then maybe Machiavelli didn't just leave us a warning, maybe he left us a roadmap. A way to understand the darkness, not so we can surrender to it, but so we can learn how to pierce it. And if enough of us choose that path, quietly, consistently, courageously, then maybe the next time power opens its doors, it won't be the idiot who walks through. It'll be someone like you